Can you understand how Canadians might find that disingenuous? Yesterday, your government is calling people who supported somebody else cold, cruel, and small. And today you want to engage and listen to them. Do you understand how that might fall on deaf ears?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone.
Vassy Kapelos interviewed former Liberal House Leader Karina Gould about the catastrophic results in last night's by-election. Not only did Karina talk herself into a corner, but she may have given a hint to Justin Trudeau being forced out of caucus.
Let's take a look.
Minister Karina Gould is the party's Ontario campaign co-chair. Hi, Minister. Good to see you again. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Vassy.
Minister, should the Prime Minister resign as leader of your party?
Okay, we're off to the races.
Yeah. Vassy doesn't mince words. That's why we love her.
It's great. Like, she's just like, no beat around the bush. And, you know, you can tell right before the interview, she's like, oh, how's your kids doing? How's this? How's that? And she's probably, you know, very, very sweet and just approachable. And then as soon as the camera goes on, she's like, all right, why is Justin Trudeau suck?
Business time, yeah.
So I wonder if it takes some of them off guard or if they're kind of used to that now. So if they watch Northern Perspective, they'd know. So anyway, so Karina, should he step down?
No.
Why not?
Wow, savage. Oh my goodness, did you hear that?
Oh yeah. Why not? Like just
Wow.
taking no prisoners. Just
Incredible.
I love it. And yeah, we're getting excited over Vassy, but she's handling these Liberals the way Canadians would want somebody as a journalist to be handling them.
Well, and you know what? When somebody's doing their job properly and actually asking the hard questions for Canadians, I think they deserve to know that they're doing a great job.
Yeah, she's like a master chef, you know, cutting sushi, and you're just in awe watching it, and you get excited because you're watching somebody who's really good at her job. Hence Vassy as a journalist.
Well, look, I mean, yes, yesterday was definitely a tough loss for us as Liberals. I mean, we certainly didn't expect to lose in Toronto St. Paul's. I should start by congratulating Mr. Stewart on his win. He obviously worked very hard, and thanking Leslie Church, our fantastic candidate who ran an excellent campaign. But, you know, it was a message for us, certainly, that we need to do better, that we need to listen more closely to what the voters, not just in Toronto St. Paul's, but right across the country are telling us. But no, I don't think it means that the Prime Minister needs to resign.
So she said some things there that are going to get her into trouble. Number one, and this is the biggest mistake she just made, is she said that Canadians are sending us a message and we need to listen.
You guys haven't been listening for the past how many years?
Right. And if you're listening to people in that riding, what they're telling you is no Trudeau. That's what they're saying. And lots of people didn't vote at all because they are Liberal Party members or Liberal supporters, but they will not vote Liberal until Justin Trudeau's out. That was the first message. The second message was, you have pissed people off so much that are Liberal voters in the past that they have swung over to the Conservatives. So the message is Trudeau needs to go. I don't know if you're going to listen to that or not, but that's the biggest message, and that's going to bite her later.
And I'll ask you about that message in a moment, but what we heard from people who were canvassing the riding is very specifically their criticism of the Prime Minister himself, that they might even agree with some of the policies that your government has put forward, but that they are uncomfortable with the Prime Minister in his position or as leader of your party. Why is that not something that prompts a second look at his leadership?
Well, so first of all, I mean, the policies and the programs that we've put forward are policies and programs that wouldn't have happened had he not been prime minister. A lot of this is his leadership in pushing these things forward. I obviously have a personal affection for childcare, having been the Minister of Families, but again, like, that wouldn't have happened had Justin Trudeau not been prime minister.
So this is the part I find fascinating.
Why is that?
Because what she's trying to do is shift all of the blame for all of the policies that have been implemented off of the Liberal Party, which includes herself, and only on to Trudeau. So that to me is almost a subtle message to Trudeau, to Liberal members, and to her colleagues that I'm ready to point the finger at Trudeau and blame him for what's going on in order to save my seat. That's what that says to me. Because she's like, well, none of this would have happened without Trudeau. Okay.
So, well, she's saying none of the good stuff would have happened if it wasn't for Trudeau. But I suppose that also implies that none of the bad stuff would have happened.
Well, and she didn't categorize it as good versus bad. She's just like, all of these policies wouldn't have happened without Trudeau. So I think that's a little bit of chess there by Karina Gould.
Well, I think she's running scared because Burlington right now is slated to turn blue. So
yep.
So it's hard to disentangle, I think, his role as leader of the party from what we've actually been able to achieve for Canadians. The other thing that I would say is that, we understand, and I think have been seeing, Canadians rightfully and understandably frustrated, particularly when it comes to inflation and the high cost of, kind of everything. And we've been responding to what those issues are. But I think what the message from Toronto St. Paul's was in particular for us was that, we need to do a better job of not just listening, but also showing Canadians that we are hearing them. I think that's a really important thing too.
I think that just to circle back to the point about the Prime Minister, I mean, and his, sort of the way in which, in your view, he's so correlated with everything that your government has put on the table. Think about daycare for a second. I mean, ultimately, what you said to Canadians is if you elect Conservatives, that will be removed as an option for you, that the programs we've put in place will be removed. If the Prime Minister, everything okay?
Sorry, my battery died.
That's
Sorry.
Okay, go for it. That's okay, that's TV.
Yeah.
If the Prime Minister's leadership of your party ultimately costs you the way it did in this by-election, it won't really matter what kind of programs then that you have put. Like his leadership ultimately, even if it did bring in these programs, might jeopardize them in the future. Why are you and your fellow caucus members unwilling to confront that?
Asking the hard questions.
Really hard questions.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say on air? You can't badmouth the leader of your party when you're sitting there. I mean, you can, but she won't.
It's not a good idea. But this is the question, right? Because the Liberals' perspective is, well, don't vote for the Conservatives or they're going to cut all this stuff. Okay, well, the message is if you keep Trudeau, then you lose the election and somebody else gets elected and cuts all this stuff.
Well, and that's the allegation. We have no idea what the Conservatives are going to cut, if anything, right? I mean, we suspect there will be cuts because the budget is, what is it, $60 billion in the hole right now? You can't run a budget like that year after year after year. So changes do need to be made, but we don't know what they're going to be.
Right, and it's an impossible question that the Liberals are now talking themselves into a corner, and this is what Karina Gould has done. Like, well, no, he doesn't need to be stepping down. We just need to deliver, and we just need to do this. Okay, but the message out of St. Paul is no Trudeau. So if you keep Trudeau, your party's doomed. Now, your party's going to be doomed whether you have Trudeau or not. The question is how bad will that damage actually be, keeping Trudeau versus not? Versus bringing in somebody else to lead the party, try to salvage some sort of identity. And even if it's, a marginal, even if you keep one more seat, isn't that better than nothing? But that's the question. So What's it going to be, Karina?
Well, I mean, a conservative government ultimately is what would jeopardize these programs. I mean, we know for a fact that they have said that they would undo things like dental care or childcare.
But then wouldn't losing the election do that too?
But other things that Canadians care about a lot as well.
She's right, Vass. She's absolutely right.
Yep.
Losing the election would result in a conservative government. And then, according to Karina Gould, the conservative government would take away all these programs. So by keeping Trudeau,
It's the Barbara Streisand effect.
Yeah, you're going to end up with the exact same situation. I think strategically, the best option for the Liberal Party would be to get Trudeau to step down ASAP and then elect a new leader who has enough time to try to build up the brand. Now, they'd probably still lose the election in October 2025 if it goes that long, which I think a new leader would need that length of time in order to build up the brand and build up the party again. I think they'll still lose, but they may not lose as badly.
Yeah, here's the issue, is that you have to look at this as what's the opportunity here for a new leader, right? You have the fall session and the spring session. That's it.
Yeah, because when they come back in September 2025, they're really going to be campaigning. Like, how much legislation are they going to push through in a month?
So you don't even really get another budget, right? Because when Parliament rises in June, that's it. Because you go to election in the fall. So the timeline for the Liberals is basically this. They have to oust Trudeau now, like literally in the next week. Then they have an interim leader. Then they have to plan for a election of a new party leader. Then they actually have to coordinate that event and then have the candidates and vie for that. And all of that has to happen. And you have to have that done before the fall, because you would want your new leader to start the fall session as the new leader.
Well, and that's another thing. I think that strategically, again, the best time to do this is going to be now in the summer when Parliament's not sitting, because if you do have an interim leader, they're not going to be changing things all crazy in Parliament, trying to implement new bills, trying to implement new policies. It's just going to be kind of status quo over the summer while they're running the barbecue circuit.
Well, and here's the other thing. If Trudeau steps down, that gives something positive for those Liberal candidates to talk to their constituents on the barbecue circuit.
Yeah.
Around, right? Okay, so we've made a decision. We've heard Canadians. Trudeau is gone. So
and why don't you join our party?
Right.
You can select the next leader. You can vote in the next leadership race, etc., etc.
Right. So there, it creates a lot of opportunity for the Liberal MPs on the barbecue circuit. But they have to do this now. Now, Trudeau could... he could go rogue, man, and he could just say, you know what, I'm calling election for the fall. Like, he could technically do that.
He can dissolve Parliament anytime he wants. That's what happened in 2021.
So so if that happens, you know, he would prevent himself from being ousted as prime minister, which would be, let's face it, it's a little embarrassing. Yeah,
you'd rather lose at an election, one would imagine, than be ousted by your own party.
Well, he would lose the election but win a seat. So, you know, that's kind of the best of both worlds. And then he would resign right after that.
Right. So that's, I think, the better way to do it than have everybody in your party say, okay, get lost.
And he also has the opportunity to screw over Jagmeet's pension.
That would be amazing.
And then kind of, you know, ride off laughing into the sunset, and he gets his last kind of win, and Canadians get the election that we need, and Singh doesn't get his pension, so it's a win-win-win. But the question is he going to do that? I don't know. With Trudeau, you never know. Strategically, we know what should happen, but let's keep going.
I think when it comes to a by-election, you know, it's an opportunity for Canadians to send a government a message. What we have to do is be humble about it, I think, and listen to that message. There's going to be lots of conversations that happen over the course of this summer amongst caucus about how we reflect on the results from yesterday. It's a bit early to say, you know, what we're going to do because we just got the results early this morning. But it's going to be important for caucus members to get out, talk to their communities, talk to their constituents, hear what they have to say, and then for us to come back and, you know, really think about what our plan is moving forward.
The other thing that she is saying, which is just political suicide, is saying, oh, so what we need to do is we need to get out there and listen to Canadians and find out what they're saying. Lady,
you're not listening to the Canadians that are saying, I did not vote Liberal in this by-election because Justin Trudeau is leading the party.
You've been in power for 9 years. Why don't you know what your constituents are saying?
Because these Liberals, they're up in their ivory towers just telling Canadians what they should want and not listening to what Canadians actually do want and need.
But this is where she's talking herself into a guillotine, because everyone is hearing this saying, how don't you know? Like, don't you guys talk to your constituents on constituency week? Like, Karina, you've been on mat leave for how long? And yeah, you're dealing with your newborn and everything like that. Fine. But on the aggregate, why don't you all know what's going on in your own ridings? That's kind of your job. That's kind of why you got elected. I'm pretty sure you know. You just don't want to hear it, like Fox said.
You know as well as I do that, the election is 16 months away, and that's a lifetime in politics. Many different things can happen. And so we need to regroup, really make sure that we heard that message, and, find the way to reconnect with Canadians over the next 16 months.
Is the message, though, given the riding that it took place in, and this, the stronghold that your party has had, even in the worst of times in 2011 for the Liberals, is the message not a deafening one that you're on the wrong track?
One would think.
Right? Loud and clear. We heard the message, like it was a, F-16 running by our house last, this morning. So it's pretty darn clear Canadians have had enough of Trudeau and the policies that your government is implementing. It's that simple. You don't need to, be like, oh, well, maybe they don't like the one policy and that's why they didn't vote. No, they're being obtuse. And this is where, ironically, the Liberals are actually fulfilling their own fears, because they keep saying, well, we need to listen. But the more you talk, the more Canadians are like, you're not listening because you're not even paying attention. And they know darn well why Canadians voted the way they did. But they are playing dumb, and that is infuriating Canadians even more.
That's because the current Liberal Party is full of ideologues. They don't listen to what Canadians want or need. They tell Canadians what they need, and that Canadians are wrong if they don't believe that's what they need.
You're racist, you're cold, you're cruel.
You're burning the planet if you want to go on a road trip with your family this summer. Like, just ridiculous stuff. And that's what's going to be their downfall, this ideology. They don't listen to what Canadians want or need. They just ignore that and tell Canadians what's good for them. They are like the overbearing parent that don't actually listen to the kids. They just tell them what's what.
Well, it's certainly an important one. And I, take that very seriously. And I think everybody in Liberal circles is taking that message really seriously today. We didn't expect, if I'm being honest, to not hold that seat. We certainly thought we would, even if it was a tight race. And it was a tight race. I mean, the difference was, just over 500 votes. So that's a very tight race. But what it means is that, we've got to pay attention to what those 500 folks were talking about, and that are priorities for them. So there's a clear message in there that, we need to do better. We need to listen and hear Canadians, and we need to demonstrate that we're hearing them through the policies and the actions, and the messages that we're sharing back with Canadians. So, I take this very seriously, and there's going to be, lots of thinking and reflecting that's going to happen over the next, weeks and months.
Does that mean, in particular, when it comes to addressing the affordability crisis or cost of living crisis, that your government will chart a different path, or more largely on the economy? I take your point, it was close, it was 500 votes, but it's a 24-point swing from the last election. And by the way, Carolyn Bennett won on 9 of them in a row.
Well, I think so again, we still have to, parse through the results. It's, again, not even 24 hours after we've gotten the results. So there's going to be lots of analysis that happens, and lots of thinking and lots of reflecting. I mean, I think, speaking certainly with the candidate herself, and, her experience will be really important for us to absorb and understand, what went wrong specifically in Toronto, St. Paul's, but also, how we can learn those lessons across Toronto, across GTA, across Ontario, and across Canada.
See, listen to her. Well, we need to figure out what went wrong in Toronto, St. Paul's.
Canadians are telling you what went wrong in Toronto, St. Paul's.
Yeah, and
not
the
only,
issue...
well, and not only the people that live there, but Canadians across the country are telling you what went wrong in Toronto, St. Paul's, and it's going to go wrong in writing after writing after writing.
Right. There's nothing wrong with Toronto, St. Paul, Karina Gould. The problem is in Ottawa. That's where the problem is. And you know darn well that's what the message is, but you're like, well, we need to look at the analysis and parse out the result. Lady, there's one result. You lost.
What the analysis is.
Yeah, there's one result. You lost. That's what it is. And a massive 24-point swing. That's 24% of the popular vote shifted from the Liberals to the Conservatives.
That's huge.
That's like an avalanche of support.
Well, because when we looked at the stats on Sunday night on our live stream, the Liberals had a 75% chance to win. And the Conservatives just blew it out of the water.
And make sure that those reflections are demonstrated in our actions moving forward.
The Deputy Prime Minister yesterday, in advance of the votes being cast, said essentially that the Canadians in that riding had a choice between the Liberals and the alternative, which she characterized as cold, cruel, and small. Why would your government label opponents of it like that?
Wow.
And if you look at the look of disgust on Vassy's face, she's just like, what are you doing?
Do you know, though, I will say, I'm not sure that's a fair question to pose to Gould, because she wasn't the one who said those words.
Well, I think it is a fair question, because often what you hear from the Liberals is talking point, and they're all repeating the same thing. They're all supposed to be on the same message, which I think this is why some of the Liberals are kind of surprised at what Freeland did. They're like, okay, how are we going to square that one? Because we're all going to be asked the same question, because it's going to be assumed that they all have the same talking point.
Well, I'm not going to speak for the Deputy Prime Minister, but what I can say is that I think there is a very stark difference between the vision that our government is putting forward for Canada and that of the Conservatives. And I think our government has been very clear and, have won 3 elections on being ambitious and proud of Canada and, wanting to do, new programs and support Canadians and really deliver for them. And we have, good results to show for it. Whereas, Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives are putting forward a vision that is less ambitious. It's one that is less generous when it comes to supporting Canadians, and one that I don't think has the same kind of, support for the future of our country. So there are 2 different visions that are being put forward that Canadians can choose from and will choose from in the upcoming election. I think it's really important that we continue to demonstrate to Canadians that, their well-being economically, socially, physically, is our priority, and that we are there to continue to serve them. I think we continue to have big, bold ideas that are going to deliver for Canadians. But part of our job is to make sure that we are hearing what those priorities are for Canadians and reflecting that as a government. And so, yesterday's results gives us pause to think about, are we listening, engaging, and communicating in a way that is responding to the needs of Canadians? Maybe it's some of those things, maybe it's not all of those things, but it's certainly a moment for us as Liberals, as Liberal members of Parliament, as Liberal government, to reflect and think about how we move forward and where and what we need to change.
So notice how she kind of positioned herself as far away from Freeland as possible and said, well, what I think we should do is I think we should do this, and this, and I think all Liberal Party members. She's trying to display leadership here. She was essentially saying the absolute opposite of what Freeland was saying yesterday. And this is from the party that constantly accuses Pierre of dividing Canadians. Yet this is all they know how to do when their backs are against the wall, which is the typical left playbook: call everybody names and hope that everything just works out. Shame people into submission. Well, it's not working anymore.
No, Canadians have had enough. We're tired of what the Liberals have done to our country, and we're ready to unite together and elect a government that's going to work for us.
Can you understand how Canadians might find that disingenuous? Yesterday, your government is calling people who supported somebody else cold, cruel, and small. And today you want to engage and listen to them. Do you understand how that might fall on deaf ears?
So, I have always been very clear about the fact that we need to engage with all Canadians. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and you can go back to 2015 when the Prime Minister was very clear that, just because you vote for somebody else doesn't mean that you don't have the best interests of Canada in mind. I mean,
then why is your party calling them cold, cruel, and small?
And that's the question.
Because those are losing words.
Right?
That's what you do when your back's against the wall.
And this is the issue. This is what happens when you belong to a party. You don't get to say, well, Freeland said that, I didn't say that. No, the party said that. Welcome to a political party. Each and every person is responsible for what actually happens in that political party. So why did your party say that? And this is where it's problematic. And she's trying to completely distance herself from saying, well, I've always thought of this. And then she tries to invoke Trudeau and say, well, back in 2015, Trudeau, said that. Trudeau has called people racist. He's called them misogynists. He said they have unacceptable views. He, brought up comments of, should we tolerate certain people anymore?
Anti-science for not wanting to get vaccinated. He called us all racist when the foreign interference thing broke last spring.
Yeah. So, who's dividing Canadians, Trudeau? Because you're basically trying to say, everyone that supports us, you're here, and everybody that doesn't, you're way down here.
But this is where I think it's important for us to reflect on some of those lessons and to make sure that, we're being true to who we are as Liberals, which I really believe is engaging and listening to Canadians, to always, seeing Canadians in a positive light. That may mean that they vote for other folks. That might they vote for us. But at the end of the day, and one of the things that I've always admired about the Prime Minister is his trust in Canadians. And I have tremendous trust.
Justin Trudeau's trust in Canadians when he's calling us names.
When he's arresting protesters and charging them in a court of law with mischief. You're what?
How can she defend somebody like that?
Okay. Your political funeral.
Canadians to make, the best decision. And, at the end of the day, would I have liked to see a different result in Toronto, St. Paul's? Absolutely. Absolutely, I would have preferred for that to remain Liberal. But this is a message for us, and it's now our job to listen to it and to change our behavior accordingly.
So just to be clear, you don't believe people who voted for the Conservatives in this election are cold, cruel, or small?
No, I do not believe that. I believe that Canadians make decisions based on, the best information that they have. And I genuinely believe that every Canadian is making a decision because they believe that they're doing it in the best interests of Canada. They just have a different idea of how to get there.
This is how you can tell that the Liberal Party is just in absolute shambles right now, is there's different messaging depending on who you talk to. And Freeland's saying one thing, Karina's saying the other. You'll see our Freeland video tomorrow. There's another one. And that one was, just as much a disaster as her one yesterday that is now being thrown at Karina Gould now. But this is the whole problem. And, it comes down to this. If the Liberals were serious, which we know they're not, but if they were genuinely serious when they say, listen, we accept the result in Toronto St. Paul, we hear the message, we're listening to Canadians. If they were serious, then what they would hear is that Canadians are done with Justin Trudeau, they're done with this Liberal government, and it's time to call an election.